Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Amanda Luyster from the College of the Holy Cross, and she will speak to us today on her research from fragment to floor, a digital reconstruction of the Chertsey combat series tiles and their lost texts. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much. Thank you both to Leah and to Leo for hosting us here today. Can I just check, can you see my screen here? My slides?
Yes.
Yes, great, thank you. The Chertsey Combat Series tiles, which I show here in all their damaged glory, depict scenes of battle within a complex mosaic program, including a number of previously undeciphered Latin inscriptions. The tiles were unearthed in the 19th century as a pile of fragments with no extant tiles in situ as a result of the devastation after Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. In the 1970s, British Museum tile curator Elizabeth Eames physically reconstructed 2 roundels. These are still on view in the medieval galleries. Thanks to this physical reconstruction, the Chertsey tiles are among the most admired medieval floor tiles in England. They've been named the high watermark of medieval tile manufacture and, quote, one of the finest, if not the finest, inlaid pavements in existence. However, scholarship on the tiles to date has been limited because nearly all the remainder exist only as hundreds of small fragments in museum cabinets. With assistance from many individuals and the generous cooperation of the British Museum, including current tiles curator Beverly Nenk, I recently completed a digital reconstruction of the figural fragments as well as many of the lost texts. I argue in my forthcoming book that this digital reconstruction enables us to see that the floor's medallion design and its iconographic motifs of combat resemble luxury imported Byzantine and Islamic silks. In my book, I use this finding as an invitation to dig more deeply into the significant role of imported silks in medieval England. However, today my focus is on outlining the digital reconstruction which enables these larger conclusions. The reconstruction suggests that this pavement was an original composition, emphasizing the fictional victory of Richard the Lionheart over the Sultan Saladin in the Crusades, and informed by a tradition of literature about the Crusades in which a variety of notable figures, including Samson, are introduced in the context of battles in the Holy Land. I'm trained as a medieval art historian, and this is my first venture into digital reconstruction, either of images or of texts. I'm eager to receive suggestions and feedback. I'm also interested to hear about other reconstructions of lost texts that work along similar principles. The Chertsey combat tiles were probably commissioned for Westminster Palace around 1250 by Henry III and or his queen, Eleanor of Provence. However, none of the combat tiles have been found at Westminster. Instead, nearly all of these tiles were found in a heap in the ruins of the chapter house at Chertsey Abbey. I show you here a reconstruction of the largely destroyed Chertsey Abbey that the Chertsey Museum has been working on. We are hoping to merge our reconstructions and share them with the public in a spring 2023 exhibition, focusing on the Chertsey tiles and the visual impact of the Crusades in England. Due to the fragmented state of the Chertsey roundels, scholars interested in their iconography have, until now, had to rely on black and white drawings completed by hand, published in Eames's 1980 catalog. These drawings provided an essential waypoint in deciphering the tile's iconography. However, these drawings, like all hand drawings, are susceptible to various forms of subtle distortion and human error. We therefore created photographic composites of each design in the combat series. These have been digitally constructed from a series of carefully controlled photographs of the fragments at the British Museum and elsewhere that I took in the summer of 2017. Each fragment was photographed, then digitally isolated from its background and manipulated in Photoshop such that it precisely overlaps other fragments in the composite image. In this endeavor, much of the image manipulation was performed by Martina Imuna, then an undergraduate at my institution, the College of the Holy Cross, and Janice Desmarais, our visual literacy and arts librarian. We've also incorporated a small number of additional fragments not included within Eames's drawings in these photographic composites. Can you see my mouse here?
Yes.
Yes, great, thank you. Okay, so you can see we've been able to add the lion's head, and we also show, it's not here, we also show only one, not two chevrons on the knight's shield. In addition to correcting errors and filling in gaps, the photographic composites also provide a better sense of the actual appearance of the tiles, rich, complex, energetic, at times both graceful and comedic. The pictorial combat tiles, shattered into many pieces, were found alongside hundreds of tiles bearing text at Chertsey Abbey. Yet scholars have published many more pages of scholarship on the combat series images than the texts. For nearly 2 centuries, scholars have lamented that, quote, it is exceedingly unfortunate that the inscriptions are so heavily fragmented, but no one seriously tried to put them back together. From the 85 textual fragments in the combat series, I show today how I've been able to reconstruct some words and even some phrases. While I have a firm rationale for the reconstructive decisions I've made, the final interpretation of each fragment is just that, an interpretation. I offer my results as a robust first attempt at finding meaning in these heretofore unexamined inscriptional fragments. Each sequence of letters or letter string, sometimes incomplete because located on a broken tile, is between 1 and 4 characters in length. Ia, gli, rika. Many tiles also include punctuation, abbreviations, and ligatures. My initial aim was to determine whether certain text fragments could be combined with other fragments to make complete words. It became clear that in this attempt, there are multiple kinds of information that needed to be taken into account. Therefore, I assembled a method which entails 3 main tasks. 1, checking each word fragment against other extant tiles. 2, checking each fragment against other Latin crusading texts. And 3, checking each fragment against vocabulary frequency lists. In the end, one must balance evidence from these 3 different categories of information to make an interpretation of the most likely reading for each fragment. The rationale to use crusading texts as comparandi is based on visual evidence in the pictorial roundels. I'm aware that there is some potential for confirmation bias here, in that if I look for words in a crusading source, then I'll get words that have to do with crusading. But on the other hand, scholars for more than a century have agreed from visual evidence that this is a cycle about combats, and Richard and Saladin is very clearly a crusading subject, so I don't think this is an unreasonable choice to make. Therese Starshak, then an undergraduate, and Professor Neil Smith in our classics department, offered to write code in Scala to assist with the process of comparing Chertsey tile text to longer texts. We selected 2 Latin crusading texts written in England in the late 12th century, Richard of Deby's Chronicles of Richard I and William of Tyre's A History of Deeds Done Beyond the Sea. The Scala code matched any Chertsey string of letters to any words containing that letter string in the comparative texts. In this way, the Chertsey fragment Rika was shown to match only to the name Richard in its various Latinate forms. This computer code, nicknamed Scrabbler, has been made publicly available on GitHub. The Latin vocabulary frequency lists I used were drawn up by Paul Diedrich in 1939 and by Laszlo in 1981. I've also taken into account, when relevant, the less well-known second series of Chertsey texts. Molds for the Chertsey combat roundels remained in use for some years. In later decades, they were laid not in the complex mosaic of their original design, but instead a simpler arrangement was developed that reused at least some of the earlier texts. In some cases, the later tiles provide longer texts than the original first series. For instance, Leo survives from the Chertsey combat first series texts, while at Leonis survives in the second series texts. The complete words militus and virtus also survive in the second series texts. To my knowledge, no sustained study has ever been made of the second series texts, as indeed, no sustained study has ever been made of the first series texts. After checking each fragment in the 3 ways listed above, I created 2 tables, Table A and Table B, which I'm happy to share with you upon request. Table A is a summarized form of meaningful findings. Table B, of which I show you a little tiny extract here, contains data and decision-making processes for each text fragment. So table B contains some text fragments which are complete on their own, like parrot. Table B also contains some text fragments like AX or CA, which are just too common for meaningful analysis on their own. The interesting part of table B is where the data reveal interesting conclusions, for instance, for the fragment back, BAC. The two frequency dictionaries, Laszlo and Diedrich, yield two words containing back, which do not seem relevant to the images: the god Bacchus, or his rites, Bacchor, and Baccha, or berry, for which we do actually have the pieces, but which show no relevance to the images. However, Laszlo also contains the term baculum, and we have tile fragments to make baculo by the stick, by the staff. The code in Scrabbler shows that in crusading texts, forms of baculo are pretty common. Therefore, the two fragments, back and ulo, I reconstruct as baculo. Not coincidentally, we also have this image of a man raising a stick. This roundel enables me to introduce two of the larger images faced by our reconstruction: how to balance the legibility versus the accuracy of an image, and how to represent probably. When we reconstructed the roundel of the man raising the stick to include these two text fragments, we also decided to add a third, ruis, which is a complete word meaning you ruin or destroy. While this verb makes sense for the baculo, you ruin or destroy with the stick, there's no proof that they originally surrounded the same roundel. Additionally, the photographic reconstruction of this roundel is not easily legible due to the amount of wear on the tiles. In this case, the drawing is much easier to read. We have therefore generated multiple versions of our reconstruction. I highlight the two versions of the roundel we were just examining. At bottom center, I show a GIF that transitions from drawing to photographic composite to enable both accuracy and legibility. At left, I show the version incorporating some colored drawings and no texts. This is easily legible and does not contain any of the hypotheticals of the text. At right, I show the version entirely derived from photographs with added texts. This version shows the closest approximation to what the actual floor would have looked like, but contains some uncertainty. I show here a short list of some of the words in Table A that we reconstructed using these methods. Our final effort was to connect some of these words into phrases in relationship to the image roundels. This attempt should be understood as exploratory and hypothetical rather than prescriptive and definitive. There's no physical evidence sequencing any of these words or indeed word fragments in a particular order. However, I believe that the inscriptions surrounding Richard the Lionheart and the biblical Samson can be reconstructed with a reasonable degree of accuracy because they depict an identifiable subject that has historically been associated with particular words and phrases. Richard the Lionheart. The 1970s British Museum reconstruction, while groundbreaking, avoided the problems of the text and used ornamental tiles where text would originally have been placed. After years of work, I'd like to propose some textual fragments that could have been originally placed here. In order to reconstruct this text, we consult the list of words from Table A, and we also look for other inscriptions which were used in conjunction with images of Richard. For instance, Richard's first great seal bore the text Ricardus Dei Gratia Rex Anglorum, and his second great seal styled him similarly. Several words from Table A, Gratia, Rex, Ricardus, and Angli, thereby have a customary connection with this English king. We therefore have tile segments from Chertsey that could have been connected as following. Capital letters are used for extant tiles, lowercase are used for suggested lost letters, and the slash symbol denotes a break between tile segments. Ricardus Dei Gratia Rex Angliae. Richard, by the grace of God, King of England. This phrase then could have surrounded the famous roundel of Richard the Lionheart. Samson. The Old Testament hero Samson has long been recognized in these tiles, and his story gave rise to a substantial visual tradition. The name Samson is attested on a Chertsey tile, Sam. Table A also includes the words aura, jaws, Leo, lion, and virtus, courage, which are all frequently used in reference to Samson, as in these inscriptions from 12th and 13th century examples, virtus Samsonis, aura leonis, fortis, virtus. The later copies, second series of Chertsey texts, have additional information which is relevant. We've got a leonis, and we've got virtus, s. A reconstruction that takes into account all words from table A with known connections to Samson and the ordering witnessed in these tiles from the second series is virtus Samsonis, fortis, frigid, or leonis. The courage of Samson broke the jaws of the lion. The original inscription around Samson then could have been something like this. The remaining roundels prove more difficult because they, unlike Richard the Lionheart or Samson, are more anonymous and cannot be compared to a known textual tradition. However, reasonable reconstructions from available evidence yield. Saladin is pierced by Richard. The knight, you destroy by means of a stick. I grow in power or violence. The great lion having been penetrated, the lion perishes by means of the spear of the knight. The death of the enemy comes to pass. I defend, and having been raised up by their victory. This last phrase in particular, Victoria elati, seems convincing. It's witnessed in at least one other medieval Latin crusading text, as well as in classical texts. In conclusion, I've presented here our digital reconstruction of both images and texts from the highly fragmented Chertsey tiles, among the best known inlaid pavements in existence, probably emerging from royal patronage at Westminster Palace. Thank you.